maybe we don't send them to the front lines, but maybe we put an asterisk underneath and we say, we won't send them to the front lines, but we will put boots in the country to
Hmm.
work on repairing vehicles.
Now, Emmanuel Macron has suggested NATO troops could be sent to Ukraine. The French president said deploying soldiers on the front line couldn't be ruled out, although the idea has been rejected by the UK, US, and Germany. A spokesman for the Kremlin said it would lead to a significant escalation in the conflict. Well, let's get the thoughts of Caitlin Doornbos, Washington reporter for the New York Post, who's currently in Ukraine near the front line. Good morning, Caitlin.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Why do you think President Macron made these comments? I mean, is this an off-the-cuff remark that's been overinterpreted, or was he trying to sort of float this as a serious possibility?
Sort of both. I think what's being overreported is the fact that he said that NATO troops could go. He was not talking about NATO troops as in the NATO forces, but he was talking about individual countries in NATO sending unilaterally, just by themselves, their own troops to help support the fight. And it may not even be in those frontline roles that I'm out here watching them take part in, but also some of the support roles. Those kinds of roles could be everything from demining to helping in repair shops. So there's a wide variety of options that he was looking at, and I don't think that he was committing his own troops, but I think that he was kind of putting it out there because there's a
Mm.
critical mass loss of troops here in Ukraine.
It is interesting because I've heard some Ukraine analysts make the point that, very early on in this conflict, other Western leaders said, look, we are not going to send troops to the front line. We will support Ukraine, but we won't put boots on the ground. And that by doing that, it kind of made clear to Vladimir Putin that he could go to a certain point because there wouldn't be further escalation. And that actually, even if you have no intention of doing it, you shouldn't rule it out because, you've got to keep your opponent guessing. I mean, from a political point of view in the US, Caitlin, is the idea of NATO troops or US troops in Ukraine unthinkable at the moment for the White House?
Absolutely. The White House has promised from the beginning and at every chance since that there will be no US boots on the ground. That has been heard from President Biden over and over and over again. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't sent US troops to come train Ukrainian troops in Germany and Poland, but again, not breaching that border. And I imagine that that will stay the same. But I do think Macron has a point, which could be interesting as far as maybe we don't send them to the front lines, but maybe we put an asterisk underneath and we say, we won't send them to the front lines, but we will put boots in the country to
Mm.
work on repairing vehicles. I had a great story the other day, visiting some of the troops here that are repairing the NATO sent weapons. A lot of the US and UK sent weapons, they are trying to piece together from different weapons because there are no repair parts that are being sent from the USA being held over in Congress. So I could see some support roles being used in the background, if you will.
Yeah, just tell us a bit more, Caitlin, about your experience in Ukraine over the past couple of weeks. What kind of things have you been hearing from Ukrainians?
Yeah, everyone in Ukraine is so grateful, first of all. I always ask them what they want to say to the Western world, and the first thing out of their mouth is thank you, followed up by a quick please support us.
Yeah.
I've had the honor of being able to visit troops yesterday out here on the front lines. I'll do so again today. And then also earlier this week, I visited some locations, some garages in undisclosed locations in Ukraine, where they are keeping them very secret because they would be great targets for Russia. But they are putting together these pieces of these weapons that they are at a loss for. Not only that are they at a loss for the weapons themselves, but also they are really seeking artillery. Much of the fight out here in the flat land of the Donbas region where I am, it's key for artillery. But I'll tell you what is most interesting for me to observe is this fighting spirit for democracy. They know what it's like to be part of the Soviet Union. They don't want that. They don't want to be part of Russia. And that will keep them fighting for anything. A lot of these troops completely volunteered, even before they would get paid, and they are not ready to give up their country. And I think the Western world could take a good nod at that, because perhaps some of our countries take our own democracies for granted.
Yeah, and we keep hearing these stories of Ukrainian troops having to husband their resources and just ration their supplies and their ammunition and all that kind of stuff. Is there any news, Caitlin, on this US aid package that's passed the Senate but hasn't got through Congress yet? Any news on as and when that may be approved?
Sure. Well, the Congress was supposed to come back to session today and possibly float it on the floor, but Mike Johnson is still remaining. He is the Speaker of the House. He's the one who gets to control what legislation is voted on the floor. And he and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, they met with Joe Biden yesterday, trying to, and basically they all kind of ganged up on him and tried to convince him to put this bill to a floor vote. He says he wants border concessions. The bill originally had border concessions. Basically, it's a big mess. But I think the only way we could see that aid coming through is if they do a procedure in the Congress that is rarely used, but may be a good time for this now, where if there is enough support in the Congress to put forward a bill onto the floor and bypass the Speaker of the House, they can do that. And they only need 218 votes to do that. Right now, there's about 212 Democrats in Congress, and they will pretty much all vote for funding for Ukraine. All you'll have to need to do is knock off a handful of Republicans to come over to the Democratic side to be able to put that bill onto the vote and then push that Ukraine funding in. And so I have confidence that that will be the case. We'll hear from that within the next week, but as of now, still no aid.
It's really interesting. Caitlin, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Caitlin Doornbos, reporter for the New York Post, speaking to us live from Ukraine.